All right, so here's the deal. If you're constantly losing listings to other agents because they're discounting the commission, this video is for you. So anytime you find yourself in a situation where the seller says to you, well, we're going to go with this other option, another agent, another company, because of the commission, I'm going to show you exactly what to do about it. All right, so this conversation starts off with understanding that in the absence of value, okay, and we're going to talk a lot about the word value today, the lowest price always wins. Because if we haven't made ourselves any different, in other words, if through the eyes of the prospect says to themselves, well, everybody's offering the exact same thing, then low price in this case, in the context of this conversation, the lowest commission, the lowest amount charged for the services rendered is the differentiating value. So that is what happens when there is no value being delivered. All right. So let's get into this. So it's our job, okay, as the real estate agent, to differentiate ourselves from the other agents in the marketplace or other companies in the marketplace. Prospects owe us nothing. It's not the prospect's job to determine and try to figure out, okay, let me read between the lines to see, is this thing more valuable or is that thing more valuable? No, it's not their job. Our job is to communicate in such a way that is so compelling that it's obvious why they would pay us more money to do a job. Otherwise, again, going back to the first slide, in the absence of value, the lowest price wins. Okay, so what does that mean? Price is what you pay. Value is what you get. So what you pay for something is what it is. That is the price. The value in what you get, however, the experience in what you get, is a completely different thing. Those two things are not the same. And for a lot of newer real estate agents, I feel like they believe the value is the amount of commission charged, whether high or low or in the middle, but that is not the case. That's the price. Value is the experience we give the seller. So when we get into this whole thing of value, I think that too much content out there is like, provide value, provide value, provide value. And if you're like me, you're like, yeah, no shit, provide value. What does that mean? Give me some context. I keep hearing people talk about, you got to provide value. You got to come from value. Yeah, we understand that. My goal in this video is to give you context behind what that actually means. So value is a perception. Okay, and it's not until after somebody has an experience with you that they can look back on that experience and say, was it valuable or not? So our job, before we're hired, at the presentation, during the follow-up, during phone calls, this is when we're giving the perception of value. It's how we make them feel ahead of the experience that will determine the value in which is being received by the seller. Okay, I'm going to give you context in just a second. So what is real value? Okay, this is what I mean. All right, what I mean by that is teaching the seller something they don't already know. So many new real estate agents go to a listing appointment, go to a buyer consultation, and they're talking about the same old crap. In many cases, real talk, the consumer knows more than the agent. So the seller's like, yeah, dude, I've heard this 1,000 times before. This is nothing new. So we have to teach them something new that they don't already know. That would be an example of giving value. And I'm going to give you something tangible and practical in a second. The second way in which you can deliver value is giving the prospect or the homeowner new insights on the market, new insights. Okay, so how do we take what is happening in the real estate market and how do we give that information to the seller where the seller says to themselves, I never really thought about it that way. Okay. And so if you hear the seller say, or the prospect say things like, yeah, we've been thinking a lot about that as well. That is not a new insight. That is not new information. Therefore, there's no value. You might say, okay, I'm connecting with them. I really got it going. No, you don't. It's not new. It's not until you hear the prospect say, that's a good point. We never thought about it that way. That's when we're making the connection. That's when value is being delivered. A third way in which we can deliver real value is to provide a strategy to the seller that they believe they will get more for their home than what they've bargained for. Okay, analyticals, I know I'm driving you nuts. I'm going to get you some practical info in just a second. Stay with me because we're talking about a perception. So it's how we're communicating this information, okay? So a strategy to get them more for their home than what their home is worth. How can you deliver that message so that they believe that the likelihood of that happening is very, very high, okay? It hasn't happened yet, okay? That's yet to be determined, but we're delivering this in a way that plays to that perception. Number 4 is giving the seller the sense of comfort if they were to hire you. So how you deliver that to the seller so the seller has a decision or better yet, you put them in an emotional state of being where they feel comfortable working with you in your hands to have you handle the sale of the property. Number 5 is certainty. Okay? How certain are you making the prospect feel will determine the value in which is being perceived. And then number 6 on my list right now is how do you lower the risk? All right. So very, very little risk in that seller hiring you. These are 6 of many, many, many ways on what I'm talking about real value. And I'm going to give you some practical ways to do that. So here are the 2 questions you have to answer as a real estate agent when it comes to, are you providing value in the marketplace or are you not? Because the amount of money you get paid is directly correlated to the value you're providing to the market. So if you're not making very much money, it's because we're not providing that much value, okay? That is how this works. Here's the 2 questions. Number 1, what makes you different from other real estate agents? What makes you different? And then number 2, why should the seller hire you versus hiring a different agent? These are the 2 questions that I think that most real estate agents have a very difficult time trying to answer, that this video is going to hopefully help you do here right now. So here's what most agents do. And if you do this and you hear this, you're like, damn, he's calling me out. This is exactly what I say. It's all right. That's why we're here. Here's what most agents, this is how they answer that question, why a seller should hire them. Number 1, they get right into the company's information, the brokerage's information. We've been in business for this long and this, that, and the other thing about. Nobody cares about the brokerage. There's no disrespect to any company that you work for. I'm sure the company's phenomenal. The seller doesn't care, because how does that impact the sale of their property? How does your brokerage being in business for 21 years help the seller when you're an independent contractor? How long your brokerage has been in business help the seller in the process of the sale of their home? Go ahead, specifically tell me, what's number 1? That's right, it doesn't. It does not matter. It doesn't make you different. It's not a value proposition. This is the same old thing. So if you're using an old templated listing presentation from your brokerage, and it's all about, the company this and the company that, my recommendation with total love and respect is that you change that presentation. What the presentation should be built on is 100% around how you plan to serve the seller. What is in it for the seller if they were to hire you? That is the presentation that I teach to every single coaching client. Number 2, customer service. I give great customer service. No shit. Who doesn't? That the reason why this is not, you can't use this as something that differentiates you from other agents. Do you think for 1 second there are agents in the marketplace who say, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you hire me, you can plan on getting terrible customer service? Absolutely not. Every single agent, every single time in the past and in the future, they all plan to give good customer service. It is not different. So if everybody gives good customer service in the absence of value, the lowest commission wins, right? So if you start to use some of these, you're devaluing yourself because you're placing yourself out in the marketplace as a commodity. Commodities have no value in the marketplace because the lowest price wins. Number 3, we're going to put your property on hundreds of websites, blah, blah, blah. This is exactly what everyone else is saying. There is no value here for the seller. Number 4, we're going to do an open house. Yeah, so is everyone else. No value. Number 5, we're going to even make you a property brochure. Yeah, we've been doing that since the 70s. There is nothing different here, okay? This agent that is using these as their value offer, if you will, aren't providing any value. This is when the sellers say, well, thanks Susie Q for coming over. We're going to think about it and we'll get back to you. All they're saying is, yeah, we're going to go somewhere else that charges a lot less money than you're charging to do the exact same thing. Okay? That's why you're losing, okay? You're losing out to people that charge less than you do because you're not offering anything different from the standpoint of how it's being delivered. Okay? That's the perception of value. So here's the problem. Like I talked about, none of that stuff is new. It's what every other agent says. There's no perceived value. In other words, the seller says, okay, yeah, there's nothing different here. I knew all that. I know about open houses. I know about property brochures. I know you're going to put my house on the internet. It's 2022. I wouldn't expect anything different. I expect you to give me good customer service. And I don't care about your company. And so there's no perceived value. And so the seller looks for the agent or the company who charges the least amount. This is why you keep losing to the commission cutters or to the flat fee listing companies out there. So now let's talk about a real value exchange. Remember, it's how we communicate what we communicate, okay? The words are less important. It's all about how we make the seller feel. So let me give you some examples of what this could be like. Number 1, through the delivery, we have to create a world where the seller can only achieve these results by hiring you, all right? Here's some examples. A competition analysis. Brandon, what does that mean? Imagine the first part of your listing consultation is you pick up the sellers and you go see the 3 properties that they will compete with when their property hits the market. Ding, 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 ding. How many of you are doing that? How many of you are taking the seller and going to show them physically in the car, drive to the house, walk them through their competition with a full price analysis on all of their competition? So they've walked through the home. There's an emotional feeling through this experience. This is what I'm talking about as far as how we make people feel. Guarantee they've never done that before. I would be very curious to see how many of you are doing this right now. Here's another example. A pre-market buyer demand analysis. Imagine going to the listing appointment and saying, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, there's 17, I've identified 17 buyers who are fully approved to purchase a property just like yours in this neighborhood, already looking for a home. So one of the things I'm going to do before we even hit the market is have a conversation with all of these buyers to see how do we create a demand for the property before we hit the market so that you end up netting the most money in your pocket. Does that make sense? And now the seller's drooling. They're like, wow, yeah, that is incredible. This is very new. It's probably new to most of you. Number 3, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we're going to create a buyer demographic campaign. Specifically, what we're going to do is create a marketing strategy where we put your property in front of buyers who earn a minimum of $100,000, have two children, have lived in this area for X amount of time, that are looking for a property right on and on and on and on. Imagine you being able to deliver a conversation where the seller says, oh my gosh, we're just not going to put it on hundreds of websites. We're going to put it in front of the right buyers. It's all a perception of value. Number 4, performance guarantees. Okay, this is all about differentiating yourself from the prospect, increasing certainty while you're decreasing risk at the same time. This is called the value ladder. We have performance guarantees. So the seller has nothing to worry about, okay? I can make a whole video on that. I'm sure you guys are going to have a ton of questions. What about a performance-based compensation structure that outlines how you're going to get paid based on how you perform? Okay, very, very different in the marketplace that the seller probably has never heard, has never seen before. This is how we're creating that perceived value. A pricing strategy to get buyers to overpay for the seller's home. Now we're talking about value. Now you can see the difference between a real value exchange and things that just don't move the needle, things that don't trigger the emotions of the seller for them to sit back and say, wow, by hiring this agent, I can clearly see the value, versus interviewing all these other agents. There's nothing different there. So I'm just going to go with the agent who charges the least. This is why this script can be true. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if there was a strategy or if there was an advantage to you paying me more commission, and that meant that you netted more money in your pocket, certainly that'd be something that you'd be at least open to looking at. Am I wrong? And that's what makes that script work. Because when we have the appointment and we can walk the seller through and we can communicate from a place of delivering real value, which is what we talked about. I give you a lot of examples today. Now I'm hoping that you have context around what that means. So for all the analyticals that I drove absolutely crazy on today's video, let me know what questions you have in the comments, okay? If you're ready to have a conversation about potentially you and I working together with me as your coach and you're willing to do the work, I'm going to put a link right underneath this video and I'll pin it as the first comment. Feel free. You can click that link. We can schedule some time to have a conversation, and then you can decide if working with me at this time makes sense or not. But either way, I hope you got value from today's training video, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. I appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you soon.